Mic check, check mic. You know what I mean? Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is NOB dollar sign. No bullshit is what I do advertise. You know what I mean? Gonna be able to speak on a few things. Trying to go ahead and work this, machine the right way. I still gotta learn a couple things. But I wanted to jump on, you know, say what's up. Hope everybody's doing well, blessed and highly favored. You know what I mean? So I wanted to holler at y'all just to say a couple things. Talk about this recent, you know, last Sunday with Jamar Chase, spitting on Jalen Ramsey. There's a couple things that I want to highlight. I'm not an expert, but we're going to figure some shit out. You know what I mean? Just because this is the first conversation for the channel that I want to be able to at least, put my sports analogy input on some shit. All right? Okay. So, what's the point? I'm looking at the game, whatever, and I saw both of these individuals squaring off like they was talking. And then out of nowhere, you know what I mean, you get this substance that flies out of this, you know, out of the player's mouth, whatever, you know what I mean? I'm gonna try to be smooth and not use certain words so it be understood that I'm trying to be professional, but I'm trying to be myself. So I gotta blend both. So if I say certain words, you just gotta roll with it. You know what I mean? But let's get back to it. So Jamar Chase, jersey number one, plays for the Cincinnati Bengals. You know what I mean? Whatever, whatever. So apparently he and Jalen Ramsey had a little issue, and he winds up getting spit on, Jalen Ramsey. So long story short, if you didn't watch the game, if you didn't watch the clip, there's a lot of talk. But what was more interesting to me, because I was looking at it all, you know what I'm saying? I'm a big sports fan, so I look at the shit. I look at all of it, the stats, where you went to college and all of that shit. He went to LSU, Jamar Chase. Anyway, but let me get back to what I'm talking about. So he in the interview, well, he was being interviewed, and I was really shocked that Jamar Chase, and I wrote this shit down so I can really, put it all together. So he goes off and says, I never opened my mouth to that guy. This is after the reporter. Obviously, they had some questions, direct questions. And he comes off with his head, tilted and being cocky with it. And that's cool. It's nothing wrong with it. It's just that you got to understand at that particular moment, being cool, being fly, that ain't the program, my nigga. Like this is real life happening. You being looked at differently. You know what I mean? And these questions may come at you differently. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, he goes off saying, I never opened my mouth to that guy in a real cocky way. And the reporter was like, "Oh, you didn't spit on him," and Jamar was like, "Nope." So it was interesting just because of the man denying the whole situation, right? Literally, he was denying the whole. He didn't do it. You know what I'm saying? So I'm like, damn, my nigga, okay, whatever, whatever. Then you get the zoom in camera and shit, and then you start to see this shit, and he's still having this illusion that I didn't open my mouth type shit to that guy. So I'm thinking out loud like that's not a good look. You in denial, you know what I mean? And there's many ways you could look at it, right? So if you're in denial about what you did and everybody saw that shit, that basically means you did that shit on purpose. That's how I look at it, you know what I mean? Because if you got everybody pointing out you spitting on a motherfucker, and then you trying to act like that wasn't me wearing the number one, jersey number one, Jamar Chase type shit, playing for the Cincinnati Bengals type shit. I mean, goddamn, what do you expect? You know what I mean? But neither here nor there. He was suspended. He's trying to appeal it. I don't think that's gonna work. But we'll go ahead and see. You know, but my whole point is, straight up and down, man, that shit wasn't cool. I don't go off the limb and say, oh yeah, that's allowed. You know what I'm saying? Or that's cool. If we look back, excuse me, if we look back earlier in the year, in the beginning of the season, and I'm talking about Dak Prescott, he was also in that similar situation with defensive end Jalen Carter. That was like the first game of the season, and the game basically he was suspended, Jalen Carter, before the game even began. However, what I'm tying into the conversation is Jalen Carter, you know, was asked some questions just like Jamar Chase was. But Jalen, his quote was, "It was a mistake that happened on my side. It won't happen again." And I think that's something to be looked at. I think that if a person admits fault, admits that he was wrong, you get a slight pass. I'm not saying that you get a full pass, but you get a slight pass because you was in the wrong for spitting on Dak type shit. On the other hand, you got Jamar Chase being cool, calm, and in my opinion, a little bit delusional. You know what I'm saying? Because you trying to play the game like that wasn't you. So I don't know. You know what I mean? There's a lot of ideas that can kind of be put together, but I'm looking at it like this: what's wrong is wrong, and what's right is right. He should have apologized, just like Jalen Carter did, uh, but he chose not to. Now that's okay too, but this is the reality. You got one game suspension. You know what I mean? Uh, excuse me. They got a one game suspension for Jamar Chase. He was fined $507,156. If it were me per se, I would have gave him 2 games. Why? Because you lied. You denied everything, and you acted as if it wasn't even important to acknowledge your wrongdoings and actions. That's a problem, my nigga. Like real shit. Because here's the reality: you're still a professional athlete. We get it. But had you did that shit, let's just hypothetically say, in the streets, you know what I mean? Those two different situations are not gonna be the same. I hope you understand that. And I'm not saying that anyone would have a right to spit on anybody. Uh, no, they don't. However, if you sitting here thinking that another man is not gonna retaliate or just accept that shit, then you got another thing coming, my nigga. Like that's not gonna happen. So here's something to think about, just on the whole conversation, right? So what's the point? I mean, there's plenty of points in this situation. You know what I mean? Spitting on anybody, first of all, shouldn't be tolerated. That's not cool. You know what I mean? Bottom line, shit wasn't right. Hella disrespectful. You know what I'm talking about? So the disrespect is one thing. Not acknowledging the disrespect is a whole nother conversation, my nigga. So that's just a little something to marinate on. But yeah, he's lucky, as far as what I'm looking at, just being a sports fan. Jalen Ramsey, I'm not saying that he, you know, top flight, but let's just be clear, he ain't no regular nigga. He do got an attitude and he do got some words and he just a regular nigga on the football field. But I'm gonna promise you this. I'll promise you this. Don't be surprised if Jalen Ramsey gives one of his boys a call, because you got to remember, it's a 1 game suspension, so they got 7 games left. And I'm not promoting this, but I promise you, take a look at the upcoming weeks where the Bengals got to play whoever. I ain't looked at their schedule. But if that nigga come across the middle, I'm just saying, I'm just saying, you gonna be understanding 2 things. You can't be spitting on motherfuckers and thinking that nobody saw that shit, my nigga. Alright? And tread lightly because that one game suspension, you know what I mean, could be, looked at as a pass. But if you go over that middle and get cracked by one of these safeties or linebackers, they gonna be okay, but you not, my nigga. That's a slight warning for you to know that, okay, you think you can get away with spitting on motherfuckers type shit. Well, we gonna show you that that ain't cool type shit. Just to go ahead and marinate, just to marinate on. I'm not predicting that it's gonna happen, but I'm pretty sure Jalen Ramsey got some boys on different teams that he know he can make a phone call and be like, look, you ain't gotta do nothing but just send a message. That's all. You know what I mean? Simple. Boom. And that's probably gonna happen. I'm not saying it will, but just understand he's a wide receiver. Jalen Carter's a defensive end trying to get to the quarterback type shit. You a wide receiver, my nigga. You all the way open. Don't let you go over that middle and expect not to get tapped, nigga. You about to get, made an example of. Clearly. Not that we want that, but sometimes you do gotta send a message without spitting. I'm gonna leave it there. So there's something else I want to kind of put into the mix of all of this whole conversation. You know what I mean? It's a little bit different, but I want to be able to highlight my opinion on or my point on this. And I wrote something down. I want to kind of read it. You know what I mean? So let me see. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So what's the point? So I'm gonna drop this in a different category. We done hit, you know, one topic as far as the spitting aspect. And we understand that there's some do's and some don'ts. But I'm gonna go a little further. You know what I mean? And maybe y'all can relate. Maybe y'all will have something to say. I'm gonna open up the comments after I get everything situated. You know what I mean? But peep this. So I was thinking about calling Kaepernick just on some GP shit. Just thinking about connecting the dots if I could, right? So I wrote something down, right? Colin Kaepernick took a knee silently protesting. He was eventually, ostracized and kicked out of the NFL, basically being blackballed, right? So I got an opinion that maybe y'all can hit me with. Y'all can, connect the dots with a nigga on, right? So this is my opinion, and everybody may have a different one. So this is my take on it. So what's the point? Spitting on other players, spitting on other players in this situation is allowed, right? Just follow me. So Colin Kaepernick takes a knee and basically loses his, you know, job, etc., whatever you want to call it. But this is my take. So in my opinion, it tells me that the NFL is comfortable with their employees and players spitting on other players and employees. However, .com, you can still keep your job representing the brand, which is the NFL. All right. So, however.com on that, when you take a knee like Colin Kaepernick did, the NFL isn't comfortable with that look. The NFL owners aren't happy with that. So I guess it's safe to say it's okay to spit on the players and employees, just not on the NFL brand or its owners. Yeah, ah, shit. That's a trigger alert. You know what I mean? So think about that. Just in a general understanding, you got players that can spit on other players in the league. You can get suspended for that, right? You can get fined for that, right? But if you or had to take a knee, right? And you didn't spit on anybody, you didn't spit on the owners, you just did your shit the way that you felt that you had to do it at that moment. You know what I mean? Wouldn't you think that that should be allowed? And he didn't even disrespect nobody type shit, right? They tried to find him, but I'm just going off the limb and trying to figure out what it really is. So is it cool to spit on people in the league and still keep your job? You know that your job security is straight, but the moment you take a knee, you about to be out of the league type shit. You know what I mean? Just kind of just paint it this way. Which is worse and which is better? You know, if you're going to make a statement. I'm not saying you should spit, but I want you to connect the dots. I want you to figure it out. I want you to think outside the box. If it's okay, then why is it not okay to do this? You know, if we're going to be double standard, let's look at the situation and call it for what it is. If we're going to be a hypocrite, let's look at the situation and call it for what it is, you know? So I'm not trying to be, let's say, pointing, but I'm just observing. I'm observing some shit, you know? I'm just being observant and I peep game. And there's all kind of incidents in the NFL. I'm just using this as an example for y'all to marinate and think about, you know? So you can spit on players, be fined, and not lose your job and not be disrespected. You'll still be looked at as a good guy. But if you take a knee to stand up for something meaningful and something more, you know, let's say better, it can cost you your job and your career, you know? So what's the point in a real way? But yeah, I'm going to leave it there. Maybe y'all can marinate on some of that information, but I mean, this is just where we're at in the real world. You know, if we're going to talk about it, let's talk about it. If we're going to be observant, let's start let's start observing some shit, you know? Remember, we still look both ways to cross the street, motherfucker. That ain't changed. All right, bet. Until next time, NOB dollar sign. So what's the point? All right, peace.